we're back. I'm Jay Weidner, and you're listening to the Smoke and Mirrors Radio Hour. I'm talking tonight to my old friend, Pedram Shojai, and we're on the eve of the release of his 3-part comprehensive DVD set from Sacred Mysteries called The Alchemy of Qigong. And this has been said by no less than Alberto Violdo, who was our guest last night, that the most comprehensive DVD series on Qigong ever. So get ready for that one. We've already got a lot of interest from Amazon and all sorts of things on this DVD. I've never seen one by an unknown take off quite so fast. So that's good luck for us, hopefully. How you doing, Pedram?
I am doing fantastic, Jay. How you doing tonight?
Good. You get home from the traffic?
It's always a challenge in Southern California.
Yeah. One day, all of the traffic, there's going to be a series of accidents involving semis in L.A. and Orange County, and every single highway is going to be closed.
Well, it's a good thing we got talk radio.
I hope you're home when that happens. Anyway. Anyway, so I've been reading this great book that you recommended to me, the Shaolin Grand Master's Text, which I'm actually reading it again. Quite a very good book, actually. And I wanted to get into Shaolin tonight, because that's really the basis of your DVD series. It's based on the Shaolin method. And I guess, I was going to start at the beginning with the Buddha and then get into some of the other stuff. But as I was getting near the end of the book, I began... as you probably know, there's been a couple of Obama's advisors who have said publicly that they were their favorite philosopher was Mao Zedong, and which I find shocking because Mao is one of the largest mass murderers in human history. But then I was reading about what he did to the ancient martial arts temples and schools, especially Shaolin in China, and I'm stunned and shocked that they're actually trying to wipe out the memory of Shaolin in China. Is this continuing today, or they started loosening up a little bit?
Well, they've done one better, actually, is they've replaced the living tradition in the temples of Shaolin, especially the main temple, and basically turned it into a Chinese version of Disneyland. They've they've put in their puppet monks, and they've put in a bunch of kids doing calisthenics, and they've it's basically counter mimicry, right? They've set up a system to make it look like Shaolin and make it they have the bells and whistles, they have the external appearances, they have all these kids doing the basically wushu. It's a Olympic style martial arts training. But what they've done is they've sucked the life out of it, because any political system that wants to dominate the minds of men must take out any sort of ideology or any sort of ideas that involve, the liberation of one's consciousness. You can't control a liberated mind. And so,
yes, I agree. And this is so important because there's so many people in the so-called spiritual movement who, they call themselves liberal and they have good intentions and everything, but I don't think they quite realize what could happen if a political system like this took over. You could have yoga highly regulated, say in the new healthcare plan, or even qigong could be highly regulated, and even the spiritual aspects could be driven out of it. I mean, these things are not beyond the bounds of possibility here.
No, it's like the proverbial frog. You throw a frog into a cauldron of hot boiling water, he leaps out. But if you leave him in there and you slowly bring that water to a boil, he's gonna die in there. And so slowly but surely, our personal liberties and all these things have been taken away. I mean, if I can't go get a seed of an apple that's organic to plant in my yard, because that's now being prohibited, that's an egregious violation of my rights as a human being to be able to, be at one with the earth and be able to farm, sustainable farming practices to feed myself and my family. So it's not a far cry. I don't know how far this needs to go before we really have to do something about it, but I think now is a pretty good time, right? I mean, you don't want to wait until the Nazis have taken over your country before you realize you might have voted for the wrong team. And so, we're facing that again, and it's always the complacency of the masses that allows for the people that really do have an agenda to take over the control of our health and really leverage us with our minds and in terms of believing what we ought to believe instead of what we probably should discover for ourselves in our own consciousness. In my opinion, belief is dangerous. Experience of reality is the science that the Buddha taught. Right? Analyze reality, see what it is for yourself, and find your true nature. Don't take my word for it.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the Buddha. He came along around 500 BC, and of course everyone knows the story, or maybe they don't know the story. But why don't you, let's start with the Buddha. I don't want to spend too much time because he's a well-known person, but I want to get into some of the unknown aspects of Shaolin because it is incredibly fascinating, especially its kind of the George Lucas analogies. It's obvious that Lucas was influenced by Shaolin also in the Star Wars trilogy. But I don't want to talk about that either. I want to get into the Shaolin thing, but let's talk about the Buddha first.
Well, Buddha was a guy who grew up in a rich family in India. And so he had a very sheltered life. He lived in the court. He had courtesans. He was well taken care of. And as they were transporting him from one palace to another at one point in his adolescence, he peeked out of his carriage or the devices that they would carry these princely boys around in. And that was strictly forbidden because what he saw was really inconvenient. He saw poverty. He saw suffering. He saw death. And he saw the subjects of his father's kingdom. And he's sitting there scratching his head, saying, "What the hell is that?" Right? My life is so good, I don't even understand what's wrong with these people. And so it led him to, it's like the proverbial fruit. And he bit into the fruit of knowledge. He saw what he had to see, and he was doomed to pursue it. He had to figure out what this thing called life was about, and what the nature of this suffering that he saw around him was all about. And the good news for us is the Buddha was the real quintessential scientist, because he had to know he wasn't going to take anyone's word for it, and he basically didn't stop asking and didn't stop pursuing until he found the answer within himself, and he was able to liberate his consciousness from these cycles of birth and rebirth and the perpetual cycle of suffering that humanity is walking around in this dreamy-like trance. So the Buddha was able to sit eventually, after studying with many teachers and really trying to, he tried every way he could up the mountain, and was thwarted along the way because he couldn't quite size up what he needed to realize, and couldn't quite find the answer until he did the most important thing he could have done, which is he sat under a Bodhi tree and said, "You know what? That's it. I'm not getting up. I'm not moving until I find the answer. I will die trying." And that ultimate release, that step into oblivion, that annihilation of self for the greater knowledge, for the understanding of reality as it is, eventually allowed the answer to dawn on him. When his disciples asked him, "What's it like, this thing called enlightenment?" And he said, "It's very simple. It's like I woke up. I was asleep, and then I woke up." If you could compare it to your own life, you wake up in the morning, it's a different form of consciousness. You wake up to it. And so that's what Buddhists have been studying, and what Buddhists have, more importantly, been practicing since the dawn of this era, right?